Welcome back to IGN's History of Awesome, a year-by-year breakdown of games, movies, TV shows, toys, and more that became a special part of geek history and our hearts. 1978 introduced a little old game called Space Invaders, addicting a legion of newly turned video game fans. It was also a huge year for genre movies, including horror classics like Halloween and Dawn of the Dead, and the birth of the modern-day superhero movie, Superman. But that's not all for 1978, so let's now see why the year was so special.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to The History of Awesome. It is the awesome year 1978, and I'm here with Jim, Marty,
hey,
Brian.
What's up?
My name is Sam Claiborne. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that happened in 1978, but in 1977, Star Wars happened, and that really influenced everything we know about entertainment culture from then until now. But man, it hit hard in 1978, and the first topic we're going to talk about is Space Invaders, which pretty much let you play Star Wars.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, that's one of those, man, that's probably the most influential game early on this list.
Yeah.
Like you were saying that this was everyone in 77 was obsessed with Star Wars, and then all of a sudden you can go to an arcade and live out this awesome space battle fantasy.
Right, as we all know, there was one very early game about space, which is computer space, the very first, kind of a PC video game. But interestingly, or I shouldn't say PC, computer. Interestingly enough, Space Invaders was the first sci-fi game that was popular in any way. Before that, we had games based on sports, like Pong. We had games based on driving. But Space Invaders, allowed you to shoot aliens. And it wasn't even a space game to begin with. It was like a game about fish. And then the creator, Taito, the company that created this game, has gone on the record talking about this a lot. But they said that it was really Star Wars that changed their mind and made it into
crazy.
It was a game about shooting fish.
Yeah, it's Japanese, right? So that's another big topic. Fishing
That doesn't make it okay.
Shooting fish in a barrel.
I know. But fishing culture, and as we know, fish
Who the hell
are very
shoots
popular
fish
in Japan.
anyways?
Rude people.
I mean,
Well-
you choke on the lead? No,
Yeah, I guess
terrible.
It's hard to figure out because you're not shooting harpoons or anything. But they did change it to some kind of apocalyptic game, really, because you can destroy your own bases while you're shooting in Space Invaders. And I know how much Space Invaders you guys played. I know you have.
I played a lot.
We've played arcade games at conventions before.
Yeah, Space Invaders is always, I always loved Space Invaders. It has a special place in my heart. And it's actually one of those games that was recreated many, many times over throughout the years and always kind of held up in some capacity. Like there was Space Invaders Infinity Gene on iOS, and there was Space Invaders Extreme. And
DS, yeah.
The DS one was really cool. And it's a very simple concept. It's just impending doom is coming down upon this soul spaceship, and she has to destroy everything above it without destroying its own protective barrier. But the one problem I always had with Space Invaders is I never really understood what the aliens would do when they got to the bottom.
Yeah.
You were questioning their motive?
I mean, when you're a kid and you play a game that's so simple like that, and it was a simple looking game, but it did also have a ton of personality. Like all the way each character was designed. The actual Space Invaders looked differently, and they all had different AI. And every now and then you'd have that ship that would go across really fast, so you'd have to take down. And it was like a mini game inside the actual game. But I always thought to myself, there's nothing but darkness down here. These guys get down here, are they going to colonize?
You're a very existential kid. Nothing but
what's cool? And when
I drank a lot as a child.
When we play Space Invaders now, you don't realize, like if you're playing it on your DS or something, you don't realize like when you went to the arcade or the boardwalk to play this game, it was actually in a giant art-filled cabinet, and it had a reflective screen, so you were actually looking into this like void, and it was a really brightly lit up planet. Under it, like a neon almost planet, and the Space Invaders were landing on they were projected.
It wasn't all
on
darkness
a
and
so you were defending a lonely rock.
I don't think I could reach that high.
Yeah. And then of course the side art had like these kind of zombie-looking space aliens on them that are like in these big. They look like they're drawn with lasers. It's really cool.
Which I never really understood because you don't actually really see those guys.
They don't have bodies.
Yeah. So I guess they're the ones inside the ships.
Yeah.
But the ships look like faces.
Maybe
for me,
that's
a lot of those arcade games though were when you're a little kid at that time, those are the ones you got muscled out of by like the bigger kids that look like the kids from like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You know?
And then the cigarettes roll up in their sleeves.
Yeah, and you're like, I guess I can't play that. I'll go, you know.
Yeah, so the scariest thing in the world to a kid is a teenager, basically.
Yeah.
It's more than an adult is a teenager.
They'll take your ball, or they'll just
he's
take
a
the video game.
super-powered kid who can beat you at any video game.
And as an adult, the scariest thing in the world is still a teenager.
It's true. That's true.
So up until Space Invaders came out, American-made video games were what everybody played.
Yeah.
From Pong on forward. But Taito made Space Invaders, and not only was it a hit here, but it was a massive hit in Japan.
Yeah.
It was just so popular. 300,000 arcade machines were made in Japan alone. 60,000 in the United States. Those numbers are just amazing, and it became the highest grossing entertainment product of its time.
Yeah.
Like more than Star Wars. It grossed more money than Star Wars overall. Have you guys heard the rumor about the 100 yen coin?
Yeah.
That's not true. But,
so explain what that was, actually.
Yeah, so in Japan, instead of a quarter, here it cost a quarter, by the way. Games have always cost a quarter until, they started costing 75 cents, like a Dragon's Lair area. But they cost 100 yen coin, and there was like, I don't know even where the rumor started that the 100 yen coins were in short supply because they were all in Space Invaders machines. But that doesn't really make too much sense if you think about it, because if your machine fills up with quarters, you can't actually, or yen coins, you can't make any more money. So really, the operator would just take those and take them to the bank, and they'd go back into circulation right away, because they're not just hoarding coins, they're changing them into paper money.
Yeah, totally.
Or whatever, they're putting them in their bank account.
Even though, like, Space Invaders, probably along with Pac-Man, are still like the most idiot-proof, user-friendly kind of games that anyone could play. You know? I mean, it's a simple objective. Just shoot the damn thing.
And it's also just
for a high score, which didn't exist before.
Yeah.
There were scores in Pong like who would win, but there was no high score.
But Space Invaders, it's almost that imagery and the soundscape is what people think of when they think of arcades. Like that has just become that's an arcade game.
Yeah, it's like it's as recognizable as Mario almost.
Totally.
The pixelated Space Invader itself. Did you guys know that that game was also black and white? So it's actually a very primitive game. It's a simple, primitive game, except there's these little gels they put over the screen, so they change color as they
based on the layer that they're in. I know that because when they put that game out on Game Boy, which it was one of the first games that worked through the Super Game Boy, and they actually recreated that old arcade border for it and did the same sort of cover overlays for it. Yeah.
So if you were in the arcades, you could play a lot of video games by this point, but there was not really an arcade scene yet. At home, the Atari had come out, but there wasn't a whole lot of games to play on Atari. But there were handheld games that were starting to hit the market. Maybe not what you'd think of handheld games as being now. One of those was Simon. Which was I don't know how to describe it. It was a rhythm
it's memory.
It's a memory. Yeah. So you have 4 colors on a board, and each one makes a sound, and basically it plays you sounds, and then you hit the colors to replay those sounds. It goes to 100.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I don't think.
I've never seen that.
Basically, isn't that like the start of like every now thing that you buy for like a 3-year-old to teach them like
And
the
like
cow
colors and
goes
noises.
moo, and the thing, you know?
I guess I didn't realize that Simon had a kill screen.
Yeah, totally. And there's like world records, but they're based on how many times you got to that 100th level.
Yeah,
but they had more and more things to memorize, so it's actually really impressive.
It was definitely a toy that I had and all my friends had, but no one truly loved. Like it was incredibly frustrating and almost like
by our generation, I don't think it was a beloved game, but everybody was ubiquitous.
Yeah, there were video games that we played and they made you feel like a god, and then there were video games you played that made you feel like an idiot, and that's what Simon did for me. I would play it and I would be like, after 7 or 8 things, I'd be like, I don't have the memory span to remember if that was blue or red or green. So and Simon was actually also the inspiration, oddly enough, for some of the worst video game puzzles in modern video games now.
Totally,
like you actually
pressure-based puzzles.
Yeah, you'll see it in video games now. You'll be playing a first-person shooter, and they'll be like, you have to unlock this door, and it'll be this like color match puzzle. It'll be like, doot, 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 and you have to match it. And if you don't do it right, you're like, I should have practiced this more in the 80s.
But that's totally not fair to anybody who has like color pattern blindness. Like I have that. Like it's tough for me to see. Like even that's why I never wear ties, because I can't match. And I'm like, when I get to that stuff, I'm like, screw it.
So Simon was
not even thinking of
Simon
me.
was on hard mode for you, basically.
Basically, I think that's probably even as a kid, I'm like, I don't like this game. So I just didn't,
So the other killer handheld app that year, 1978, Speak and Spell. Like Simon, it made noise, it was colorful, but it was very different. I myself never played with the Speak and Spell.
I had one.
I know you guys did. Can you explain what they are?
So it was a tiny, terrifying robot that would speak words to you, and then you had to type them out on this very like plasticky, clicky, rudimentary keyboard. And if you spelled them right, it gave you this sort of auditory pat on the back, and if it didn't, it made this death chime.
Super high tech. Do you just hear a computer pronouncing words at the time?
Yeah, it would be like rutabaga, and you'd be like, oh no, like, ah!
Did you ever play with any of the interchangeable cartridges? Because that's a big deal. Like Game Boy had interchangeable games.
Yeah,
it was like a Hangman type game.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I guess I forgot about that stuff.
And there's built-in ones too.
Yeah.
There are so many iterations that we all remember different speaking spells, though.
Yeah.
I remember growing up like in the early 90s, we had one in like a math class for some reason, or maybe it was a computer science class, and it was just there in the corner, and everyone
That was
like,
considered like cutting edge school funding.
Yeah, and we're just like, what is this? And it was like, does anyone want to play with this? It's like, no, we're gonna go play with Oregon Trail and number bunches.
A coworker of ours, Jared Petty, was talking about how since it preceded the Game Boy and stuff like that, he used to love playing it on car trips, and I was just like, your parents must have hated that.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even imagine like driving to Disneyland or whatever, and you got to listen to that rutabaga like the entire. I was
Why is that the word that you
I don't know. I think that's the one I got wrong.
Yeah, I don't think there were earbuds that you could hook up to.
No, definitely not.
So, like 1978 was a year of sci-fi and cool new gadgets and stuff like that. It was also a landmark year for horror.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about a couple different movies and even a book from this year. Dawn of the Dead came out in 1978.
Yeah.
To date, one of the best zombie movies ever made. It really kind of laid the foundation of what a post-apocalyptic zombie hellscape is like.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. And everything's lost in Dawn of the Dead. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of finding out like, what you can salvage from the world and from civilization.
100%.
And of course, people are as scary as zombies.
And Night of the Living Dead started the whole zombie obsession.
Same guy, Romero.
Yeah.
Same guy, yeah. And I think what made Dawn of the Dead sort of ring with us so much more was that it took place in an environment that everybody understood.
It was so familiar.
Yeah. Night of the Living Dead was basically...
Did you know in that year, the mall was still not
They have
a
to
big thing
explain
yet.
the mall at one point. I just rewatched the movie the other night in preparation for this, and they're flying in on the helicopter. They're probably going to that mall. One of those large indoor shopping centers.
Because to your point,
they have to explain what
they were
the mall is.
becoming ubiquitous at the time, so people didn't know what they are.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was a funny tidbit that they
It's
included.
also too. You know what's funny?
What's a mall?
I wonder if it's one of the first movies where they actually show people playing arcade games. Because there's a scene
there an arcade
when
in it? Oh, man.
there's an arcade,
I gotta check that out.
and I'm like, I don't think I remember movies before. I don't know if Saturday Night Fever ever had them.
Jaws has a boardwalk arcade.
Okay, but in terms of actual,
like in a mall, too.
characters playing a video game in a movie, that really stood out to me. I'm like,
Wow,
I don't
that's
think
cool.
I ever.
It was
saw
also
that.
it was full color, unlike Night of the Living Dead, which was black and white. And Night of the Living Dead took place basically in a house in the middle of some town that no one ever knew and no one cared about, right? So it was really hard to identify with. It was just one self-contained story in one night. Whereas this was now suddenly a sort of a documentary about consumerism.
Yeah.
It was talking about
Where do the zombies go? Well, they go where they used to go.
and it was saying that even without a
Yeah.
zombie apocalypse, this is how we look shoveling or moving shopping carts around a mall, just buying crap we don't need. And it was sort of amazing to see that. It was also like, I think it was the first time they sort of contextualized the story behind this. And this is something that even The Walking Dead, which borrows heavily from Dawn of the Dead, and obviously wouldn't...
Except the zombies are a little too fast in Walking Dead.
Sure, but I would say...
They're so slow in the Romero movies.
I would say if it wasn't for Romero, there wouldn't be... Walking Dead wouldn't be where it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously, 100%. But, they actually said when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. And that's about as much story as we've ever gotten from either that or The Walking Dead. They just present, this is a zombie apocalypse, deal with it. They don't say,
here's some
this
theology.
And a lot of people go, "Why? How did this happen?" They're like, "Don't worry about it. How do we solve it? Never."
So when I was in high school, I would go to the mall and we would like break into the back area. You just walk into the corridors in the back of the mall. I don't know if you guys ever did this, but you could just open a door in the mall and walk behind all the stores. And it's really freaky to see what's behind all the stores. And there'd be like stuff on the ground. Like I remember getting a bunch of Dreamcast buttons on the ground. But there's just like, you kind of explore this like giant facility. That's actually what Romero was doing when he came up with the idea for this. He went to a mall got to see what was going on behind the scenes, and offhandedly heard like the guy who's giving him the tour say, "Wouldn't this be a great place to shack up if anything ever went wrong? You could survive forever."
Yeah. And
Well, it's like that mall still, like to this day, I think it was Monroeville, Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's one of those horror landmarks that people want to go and see. You know,
it's also a prime example of a small original movie like Night of the Living Dead, a small original thing. Think about it as a movie or a game, and it's made on a low budget. It's made very simple in a single location. And then the sequel,
$650,000 to make. It made $55 million.
Yes, and then the sequel absolutely blows up. The scope gets bigger, the setting gets bigger, the set pieces get bigger, and that's just sort of how sequels exist nowadays.
It's why I love the Dead movies, because they started it with night and then dawn and then day, and each one of those things in scope got bigger and bigger. Like Day of the Dead was about the military, like trying to take down an entire country full of zombies, basically. And it started as a house, and now it's a mall, and then it's an entire country, and soon it's the world. And that's fascinating to watch that idea grow.
Yeah. There's also, I don't think Romero gets enough kind of credit for being, kind of politically progressive too. At a time when there weren't a lot of African American lead characters, both Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
It's an African American male lead character.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and of course the ending of Night of the Living Dead has a lot of social commentary to it. And so does the end of Dawn of the Dead. And I just think that he doesn't get that kind of respect or acknowledgement of that at that time. You know?
And now Dawn of the Dead was remade by Zack Snyder.
Yeah, written by James Gunn. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, so like awesome team of people. It's actually my favorite Zack Snyder movie of all the films he's done. And they added a lot of it wasn't a shot for shot remake, but it was set in a modern mall, and there was a lot of new things that were added to it. A lot of the zombie deaths were insane. There's a lot of
fast,
stuff that
right? The zombies are fast.
They're faster. There is a zombie baby is born in that movie.
Oh my God,
there's a part where they outfit.
There is a pregnant woman in the original Dawn of the Dead.
So he took that idea to the extreme. There's also a part where they outfit a car with chainsaws, which is totally what went into games like Dead Rising. You can sort of map the
malls and
influence.
zombies.
100%. They made a Dead Rising was a Dawn of the Dead video game, basically.
So another landmark horror movie that is genre defining from the same year, Halloween. Came out around the same time, actually. Both those came out in the fall of 1978. Halloween, of course, John Carpenter's first major success. He also did the music for that movie, which is super simple and fantastic.
Great.
Like he said he couldn't read music or anything, but he could get on a keyboard and play, and he did a really good job with that. But this movie was the start of kind of like not a great genre, but the slasher genre, which was so popular.
I mean, I know that, technically, Norman Bates preceded all that with Psycho, but the idea of the kind of holiday-themed horror movie, which became such a thing between,
And there's other firsts too, like teens being picked off one by one. Big theme, teens being sexual and then being killed. Like these are all
the
like
mask killer.
The mask killer. They're
all the rules
which
in
is a
Scream.
James Kirk mask from Star Trek, like one of those plastic, I think Ben Cooper masks, spray painted white. That's the Halloween mask. Super creepy though. It's great. I want to make one of those.
That movie remains probably my favorite horror movie of all time.
Really?
Probably one of my 20 favorite movies of all time.
When did you see it?
Oh, as a kid, it's like one of my dad's favorite movies of all time, so I got introduced to it really early. There's something, like when I actually started to learn about like the craft of filmmaking, the lighting in that movie is absolutely incredible. How they light night scenes with that like sort of neon blue light that pervades everything. The score is phenomenal. Jamie Lee Curtis is incredible as this helpless woman that you're following around, that you feel for it, like as this horrible hell is erupting around
the
her.
final girl.
It is always kind of amazing how you see where all the tropes kind of come from, and the source is always something awesome.
Yes, and you take it for granted because you're like, oh well, I've seen this 1,000 times before, and you're like, well, you know what? In '78, you hadn't seen it 1,000 times.
Also, though, like look back at those movies and the pacing. Nowadays, so many horror movies are right off the bat just like almost too much too soon. These movies really took their time, and it was a slow build-up.
And then learning through the sequels, obviously, Halloween 2 is great. It sort of tapers off after there a little bit, but getting the backstory of who Michael Myers is and everything about Dr.
And then they just have one without Michael Myers at all.
There's witches, right? Like Halloween 3 is the season of the witch.
You were mentioning it's about a holiday. It was actually filmed earlier in the year in the spring. and in Pasadena, there was no pumpkins available, so they had to really search high and low to make like jack-o'-lantern scenes, which was just a great opening scene of that movie.
Oh, totally.
Which is just this picture of this jack-o'-lantern with the music playing. And there's all this foreshadowing because of the eye, and there's some eye stabbings, and that movie's not that gory.
No, not at all.
If you watch it, it's like it's okay for kids to watch in the sense that it's like like I was saying, I'm trying to defend your dad here. Because it's not super gory, but it's really scary.
Well,
and it's a Halloween movie.
So that was the great thing. This actually was a before a lot of like the debates about video game violence and violence in schools and like what media can go where and who can see what. And also back then, like you would see a movie that was full of F-bombs and stabbings, and they'd be like PG-13 and boobs, tons of boobs. And there was this amazing sort of morbid sense of discovery that you would have as a kid in the 80s going into a video store and looking at these giant cassette tapes everywhere, and they just had these amazing, beautiful paintings on the front of them. And the horror section in the video store in my town was what I was always drawn to because it had the coolest art, right? I mean, the fantasy stuff was great, looking at like Neverending Story and stuff like that, but looking at like Ghoulies, and then looking at like Halloween and Night of the Living, Night
all
of
the typefaces were dripping.
The
cases were always black with like white lighting.
And I would go up and I would get Transformers the animated movie, and I put that on top. And then my second choice, because they were two movies for $2.25 was the deal.
You hide
the other one would just be like, what's this? Halloween? It's about trick or treating. All right. And we get in the car and I'd go home and then I'd run on my parents' bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and be like, ah! But you don't get that anymore going just on Netflix and browsing through covers, because it's just kind of like, it's just not the same. There was something tangible about picking up this dusty, freaky looking box and being like, this is going to scare the crap out of me.
So speaking of things that scared the crap out of us in 1978, finally, The Stand. Stephen King's super famous.
Some people
book.
sort of call it his magnum opus. It's the original version was released in '78, and it was over 800 pages. In the '90s, he rewrote it a little bit and added like 300 or 400
pages. That's really
pages.
Strange. I've never heard of.
Like because the version you can get now is like 1,100 pages.
The Hobbit was kind of like that.
Very
different book though.
The thing about The Stand is it melds so many rad different types of horror together. It starts as this virus, Captain Trips, breaks out, and so it's this sort of commentary on and a look forward. Honestly, it's a lot of the, like when you think about the sort of the anthrax and the bird flu scare that happened in the past decade, this preceded all of that, but then it opens up into a bigger story, this biblical good versus evil war, where you have this guy called the Walking Dude who ends up being Randall Flagg. He's the main antagonist in the Dark Tower series, so he sort of becomes the main bad guy.
So is this part of the Dark Tower series?
Yeah, in theory, because it's not one of the Dark Tower books, but Randall Flagg, the Man in Black, is the main bad guy in this and the main bad guy in the Gunslinger, and they also visit the world of The Stand.
Shared universe.
He was doing it first. Marvel owes him that paycheck. But just and this book had such an amazing cast of characters, this fantastic, sprawling odyssey across America that ended in Vegas. So it had the social commentary about, all the sinners and bad guys were held up in Vegas.
Will it ever make a good movie?
That's the big.
We
got
a TV miniseries.
With Rob
actually, didn't we?
That only got one.
Okay, I could have sworn they were trying to make that again like a year ago.
So
they're still trying to. They're still trying to do it.
A bunch of people
the guy
have
who
been
made
attached
Fault
to
in
it.
Our Stars.
Yeah, but originally like Ben Affleck was attached to it, Ron Howard, Javier Bardem at one point, but now
Javier Bardem was supposed to do the Dark Tower.
The Dark Tower, that's right.
Yeah, he was going to be the gunslinger, and then I think, but for the current one, they're talking about. Because after McConaughey won his Oscar, everyone wants him for something. So he was up for the role of Flagg, but I don't know what's going on right now.
Especially like, we're going to turn it into 4 movies. I'm like, that's a lot of movies. But I remember too, this is a book that I read way before I should have started reading it, just if only because like it was an 800, I think at the time, I guess an 1,100 page commitment when I was in like middle school. And I feel like it took me the better part of like a literal year to read
That's
this.
what I remember people reading Stephen King. Like
totally.
Kids walking around with books that were way too big. Like I was reading like Boxcar Children, I was like, what are you reading?
And I think at one point in my life it was like my favorite book of all time. And then
it sounds like a good summer read.
It's a great summer
read. So 1977, Star Wars came out. Best special effects movie, to date. Huge deal. Kind of came out of nowhere. People weren't expecting it. Superman, on the other hand, which came out in 1978, was expected for a long time. It had been in production forever. People knew about it, and it had a huge popular cast, and so much money went into it, and it turned out pretty great considering all the hype around it could have set it up to fail. And it came out in late '78, so it barely made it in December. The budget for it was $55 million, which was a really high, maybe the highest to date for like budgeting for the movie too. But it was billed as "You Will Believe a Man Can Fly."
And you did. I mean, it's kind of, the flying effects look kind of hokey by today's standards, but as a little kid watching it, it transported you to it. There were actually a bunch of different films in one. You got the sort of sci-fi opening,
Yep.
This very austere, cerebral.
It looks like Tron. They're all wearing these reflective suits. You have Marlon Brando is actually like standing up and walking around doing his character, which he didn't want to do.
And this is they got him, after The Godfather and his Oscar win, and sort of at the height of him being kind of the esteemed elder statesman of American actors at that point, even though he wasn't older, he was only in his 50s, But
really?
If that, I think, he was. And he, and then they had, Gene Hackman coming off of his Oscar win for French Connection, and so it did start this sort of thing of getting quality big name actors for key roles in a comic book movie.
It wasn't camp.
Yeah. Although certainly they had, the comic relief with Otis and Luther and
and there's some goofiness in the end with the Earth being rewound, of course.
But for the most part, there was a lot of it was played straight, and you have this whole sort of
straight in a comic book sense.
But think about the death of Pa Kent in the middle movie, which is this kind of rustic coming of age story. Glenn Ford's only in the movie a few scenes, but his death scene, people still remember that, and it had such impact, so you believed a man could fly, but you also just believed in that man, and that's what they had to get done. They had to get Clark Kent right in order for Superman to work.
Man, Zack Snyder really loved this year.
Think about it. He basically ended up redoing both of those things. But also, Christopher Reeve he's the linchpin to that movie working. You believed he.
That's his real muscles too. He's not wearing a suit.
You actually had to really, and this is back before you had the six-pack abs. So the fact that he just basically looked like
a strong man.
And
he's your dad.
Yeah.
Like Superman is, when you're a kid, Superman is the character that you believe in more than any other character. Because you're not old enough to understand that Batman's ostensibly cooler because he's darker and mysterious and his parents are dead and there's a whole messed up backstory.
Well, his parents are dead too.
Yeah, well, and like when you're a kid, it's lost on you that Marlon Brando's in this movie or that Christopher Reeves is in this movie. Like you're just watching your favorite hero in the world fly. And I saw this film and I went to Kmart with my mom and I said, I want those Superman pajamas that have the red feet at the bottom and they have a cape. And I climbed to the top of my stairs and I jumped. And I lived. But I tried, and it was one of those things like I would get out of the shower and like run around with a towel on, being like, I'm Superman. Like it's the most important thing in the world to a kid is this character. And when you grow up, you find other characters you love. But Superman, I don't think you really learn about how sort of one-dimensional Superman kind of is as a character until you get older and you kind of fall out of love with him, or at least a lot of people do. I know I did. That's when you start going for characters like Deadpool and Batman and Daredevil, and you're like, there's so much more interesting stuff there.
But I think it's like when you watch the old Christopher Reeve movies, he actually brought complexity to that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe Clark Kent was ever portrayed as anything other than Superman with glasses.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the old George Reeves Superman TV series, that's essentially what he is. There was no difference in personality. And Christopher Reeve really helped create the idea that nobody would recognize Superman because he played him as a completely different guy. And just that one scene where he's with Lois in the balcony of her apartment, and he flies off, and it's all and then she's doing her kind of talking to herself thing, and then Clark is at the door, and you completely buy that she wouldn't know that until she goes in the other room and he takes off his glasses and his voice changes and he straightens up and suddenly he's Superman, and then he goes right back to it and like that illusion, and it's all just acting.
Yeah, and Christopher Reeve is still, almost 40 years later, he's still sort of that model that people are.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime a Superman is cast, you're sort of putting it up against this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was just something natural about it. I mean, think about like the Batman movies in the '90s where they were like sculpting muscles on your character and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. And somebody like this, it's like it's believable. He's personable. He's human. You know.
You know, at the same time they were filming Superman, they were also filming Superman 2, and part of that was because the budget was just so enormous, and getting those actors was really tough. But Superman 2 did not end up being the Superman 2 movie that it was set out to be. Richard Donner directed Superman, who actually did one of my favorite movies ever, Goonies, and
it was coming off of The Omen of all things.
Yeah.
I mean,
Awesome.
To go from The Omen to
Well, I know they were trying to get Spielberg and Lucas, who were all just too busy.
The thing about it, though, it's actually kind of weird. Again, like Zack Snyder coming off of Dawn of the Dead, going to do like Watchmen and comic book movies, and then you have Donner starting all that.
But Donner ended up disagreeing with the producers, and the sequel did not happen the way it was supposed to. It was actually like 75% shot, and then kind of like crammed together with some new stuff.
Yeah, they had Richard Lester came in and started directing.
You can tell the difference. Like if you watch it, like they're very different movies. Like together. You could tell when you were a kid.
Tonally, Lester was much more of that sort of light comic touch. And I'm going to say something that's not a popular opinion since people have seen the Donner cut. I still prefer the original theatrical Superman.
Oh, I love the theatrical Superman.
I think
too.
I
think it's funny and it's very watchable. Some of the people that turned the role down: Robert Redford and Burt Reynolds.
Clint Eastwood too, I think.
Actually, when you see the lists of people that turned down this role or wanted the role, it's so long.
Just snapping gum.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger really wanted it, and I don't know how that would have worked to the actor.
They would have dubbed his voice like in Hercules and New York.
Wasn't Burt Reynolds also almost Han Solo?
Yeah.
That career of near misses.
I can only think of Norm Macdonald being Burt Reynolds.
100%. And now Norm Macdonald, that would be Norm Macdonald as Superman in my brain. That's
my planet blew up. So yeah.
Speaking of planets blowing up, in 1978, Star Wars.
Really worried.
Star Wars was the biggest thing in the world, entertainment-wise, and there had to be some kind of TV version of what Star Wars was. That ended up being Battlestar Galactica, which was one of the coolest looking sci-fi shows ever. I mean, it looked, especially when crammed into the small color screens on your TV at the time, it looked amazing, like giant models, beautiful show. I know we're all big fans of the new series, right? You guys have all seen the new series. When you go back and watch the old series, very different.
Yeah,
very different. But for I was, I believe, 5 years old when that was on the air, and I loved it because it was like Star Wars, and you could watch it every week on TV with a new adventure. It was one of the most, I believe, actually the most expensive pilot shot to date at that time, and so much so that they ended up having to like reuse a lot of the effects footage, and that was one of the reasons why the show didn't last. It only, I think, ran a season. The ratings, it started off strong, I believe, and then started to dip. And then between that and the cost, that's why it was only one season. But they ended up doing Galactica 1980.
Right.
And that was some new cast members, and they came to Earth, and it was weird. Like they were on like motorcycles and crap. Like you're like, what? I wanted my space show. Yeah. But it's a interesting show because it ended up getting sued. Universal was doing it. It was on ABC, and they ended up getting sued by 20th Century Fox for claiming on, I think, like 30-something counts.
32 distinct ideas were stolen from Star Wars.
And then they ended up countersuing and saying, well, Star Wars stole from our movie Silent Running, and they stole from Buck Rogers.
How great is that?
That is amazing.
And so they ended up there. I think the lawsuit petered out like 4 years later without ever going to trial and without any sort of finding. So some lawyer got rich off of people basically making science fiction.
And we all learned the word frack.
And they invented terms, for swearing that you could use on TV.
That is so great. That was the height of beeps on TV.
Measurement and everything. Yeah. So they invented this sort of language that could be used.
Yeah, part of the universe, which is a little bit further than things like Star Trek had taken.
Yeah, even Star Trek. I think the furthest they went was just saying parsec. The show that I grew up with was was much more of an adventure, much more sort of like a serial, you know? And it was, you know, but it's interesting to find out when we're doing research for this, I didn't realize that, you know, Glenn Larson was Mormon, and his Mormon faith influenced a lot of the story of Battlestar Galactica, and it's got that sort of, you know, a lot of the kind of Exodus kind of elements and things like that. So it is a fascinating sort of rich history to it when you start looking into it. You know,
That's very cool.
So 1978. What was your favorite thing that happened that year?
Who we start with?
Dawn of the Dead, for sure, 100%. I mean,
You like those blue zombies?
Yeah, yeah, they were blue.
They were very blue.
Their blood was gross too.
How easy is that if your makeup for zombies is just make them blue?
I think, well, problem is when you have a lot of zombies, you have to start using other colors after a while.
exactly right.
They probably had enough makeup for 10 real ones and then like 90
But if you have a
ones.
crowd, you can just spray them down.
Yeah, that's one way to do it.
think
Well, that's
so.
it. In a lot of those crowd shots, you look in the back and you're like, that's just an old man and he's sad. Yeah, that's not a zombie. So yeah, 100% Dawn of the Dead. Like awesome, still awesome today. Love the remake. Love the path in which it's influenced so many of the things I love now.
You can go on YouTube, and actually there are people who've done like posted their old home movies of being extras and putting on their makeup and stuff like
so
that.
cool.
You know, it's
That is
really
so cool.
fascinating.
Yeah, man, everything from this year is rad. I have to go with Halloween, though. Like I said, one of my favorite horror movies of all time, one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a movie that, you know, I watch at least once a year still. I've probably seen that movie, you know, 20, 30 times.
You watch it on Halloween?
I try to watch it on Halloween, but then I've realized recently that I work and then just get drunk on Halloween.
And so, go out killing.
And then I go out
mean,
murdering.
look,
Yeah.
it's-
I would
cutting
like it
into
to
your
be in
slashing
theaters
guy.
on
Yeah.
Halloween. That would be the ideal situation.
Man,
so
if
you
we
go
could see that
it.
at like the Castro Theater, that'd be incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That'd
I love
be
it.
great. It's a great theatrical movie. I actually saw it as part of a film class originally in the
yeah.
theater, and it was such a great experience seeing it that way.
Totally,
Just
absolutely.
shot beautifully.
Superman, that movie it was my first real kind of superhero love, that and the old Batman show that was in reruns. So it was, nowadays we
Batman
have
show's
everything
great,
like, you know, but back then, I mean, the Superman was just a whole new level of experiencing live action superheroes. Like you had Wonder Woman on TV, and there was a Spider-Man TV show in '77, but Superman, big screen, that kind of class and cast. And I mean, Nolan was definitely influenced by that. He said so, and how he approached rebooting Batman. So I mean, it's a rich legacy, and it's still one of the perfect marriages between superhero character and superhero actor, and Christopher Reeve. And he paid the price when typecasting and stuff like that, and his career suffered, but he was just ideal. And that's why for an entire generation, when he passed away, it really hurt. I mean, he was Superman, you know?
So for me, I gotta say, it's the original game program, Space Invaders.
There we go.
You didn't say we could bring props.
I love it.
I know.
This is actually the home version didn't come out until 1980. So spoilers, we will be talking about that and many more things to come. Stay tuned. In 1979, we're going to be talking about Asteroids, the game, Star Trek, the motion picture, and of course, Alien. I cannot wait. We're going to be talking about many, many other years to come, but 1979 is what we're going to stick around and talk about next. So thanks so much for tuning in. That was 1978.